The lecture hall hummed with the soft whir of translation matrices, a sound that had become as familiar to me as the clicking of my own mandibles. I was Krev, a diplomatic observer from the Quantari Collective, and I had been stationed at the Galactic Defense Academy for 3 lunar cycles now. My assignment was simple: document human integration into the wider military framework. What I did not expect was to question everything I knew about predatory species. Instructor Valen stood at the front of the amphitheater, her 4 arms clasped behind her chitinous back. She was a Thros, one of the oldest warrior races in the known sectors, and her reputation for turning soft cadets into hardened soldiers was legendary. The 150 students before her represented 23 different species, each one carefully selected for their potential in tactical combat situations. Today, Valen announced, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. We discuss neutralization protocols for apex predators. I watched as various students shifted in their seats. The Helgran twins to my left, both massive beings with stone-like skin, leaned forward with interest. Behind them a cluster of Urem floated in their containment spheres, their gaseous forms pulsing with anticipation. And then there was Marcus Webb, the human. He sat alone in the 3rd row, looking utterly unremarkable. Humans always looked unremarkable to me at first. No natural armor, no venomous capabilities, no size advantage, just soft flesh wrapped around fragile bones with those unsettling forward-facing eyes that track movement with disturbing precision. I want each of you to consider this carefully, Valen continued, pacing across the platform. In the field, you will encounter hostile fauna. Some of you may face creatures that have evolved for millions of years to kill. Your survival depends on your ability to assess and neutralize these threats. She paused, letting the words sink in. So here is your question. Her eyes, all 6 of them, scanned the room. List 3 ways to disable a predator. Hands, appendages, and various limbs shot into the air. Valen pointed to Grux, a Telmarian whose species had been hunting pack animals for centuries. Sever the primary motor cortex, Grux growled. Target the sensory organs. Compromise structural integrity of load-bearing limbs. Adequate, Valen replied, though clinical to the point of being impractical in live combat. Next, a urine spoke through its translator, the mechanical voice flat and emotionless. Introduce atmospheric toxins. Generate electromagnetic pulses to disrupt neural activity. Apply extreme thermal variance. Better? Valen nodded. Environmental advantages. Who else? More answers came. Each one was methodical, measured, the product of species who had studied combat as a science. They spoke of weak points and anatomical vulnerabilities, of calculated strikes and defensive positioning. It was all very proper, very by the book, very boring if I was being honest. Then Valen's gaze landed on Marcus Webb, and I saw something flicker across her face. Was it amusement? Concern? With a Thros it was always difficult to tell. Human Webb, she said. You have been quiet. Please share your tactical assessment. Marcus had been leaning back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other in that peculiar way humans arranged their limbs when they were relaxed. Too relaxed, some might say, for a military institution. He straightened slightly, tilted his head, and asked a question that made the entire room go silent. Temporarily or forever, the temperature in the hall seemed to drop. I felt my dorsal plates instinctively flatten against my back. Unconscious response, my species had to perceive danger. Valen's mandibles clicked together twice. A sound I had learned meant she was recalibrating her assessment of a situation. Explain, she commanded. Marcus shrugged, a gesture that looked casual but somehow carried an edge of something I could not quite identify. You asked how to disable a predator. That is a broad operational parameter. Are we talking about temporary incapacitation for escape purposes, or permanent threat elimination? This is a defensive tactics course, Valen said slowly. The assumption is survivability, not execution. Right, Marcus nodded. Just wanted to clarify the rules of engagement before I answered. He stood up, and despite his average height, every being in that room was suddenly very aware of his presence. He walked down the steps toward the demonstration floor, his movements fluid and economical. No wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. Predatory locomotion, my training manual would have called it. So, temporarily Marcus began, now standing beside the hollow projector in the center of the room. First method is sensory overload. Most predators rely heavily on a primary sense, blind them, deafen them, mask their ability to track prey. Humans carry chemical compounds for this purpose. We call them flashbangs, smoke grenades, scent disruptors. Simple, effective, buys you time. He tapped the projector and a three-dimensional render of a Kravak hunting beast materialized in the air. The creature was all teeth and claws, a nightmare from the Outer Rim territories. Second method is mobility denial, he continued. Predators are typically ambush hunters or pursuit hunters. Remove their ability to do either. Trap their limbs, create environmental barriers, force them into terrain that favors you instead of them. A fast predator in mud is just a slow target. Some of the students were taking notes now. The Hillgrand twins exchanged glances, their stone faces actually showing something resembling respect. Third method is pain compliance, Marcus said, and there was something in his tone that made my translation matrix stutter for half a second. Every creature, no matter how dangerous, has a threshold. Find it, exploit it, make continuing the attack more painful than retreat. Humans are very good at identifying pain thresholds. Valen's arms unfolded from behind her back. And if the situation required permanent solutions, the room held its breath. Marcus looked up at the holographic predator, then back at Valen. Then you do not disable it, Instructor. You remove it from the equation entirely. Elaborate. First method is catastrophic organ failure, Marcus said, and his voice had gone flat. Clinical. Every biological entity has systems that cannot be redundant. Destroy the brain, the primary heart, the central nervous cluster. Death follows in seconds. He circled the hologram slowly. Second method is exsanguination. Blood loss, if you want to be specific about it. Sever major arteries. Compromise circulatory systems. It takes longer than neural destruction, but it is equally effective and requires less precision. Predators bleed out just like prey. I noticed that several students had stopped taking notes. They were just watching now. Third method. Marcus paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost apologetic in his tone. Third method is to make them afraid. Valen's mandibles stopped clicking. Afraid. Predators are not stupid, Marcus explained. They are survival machines. If you can demonstrate that you are a bigger threat than they are, that attacking you will result in their death, most will disengage. Humans call it establishing dominance. Make them understand that you are not prey, you are something worse. The silence that followed was absolute. I found myself reevaluating every interaction I had ever had with humans. The friendly waves, the easy smiles, the self-deprecating humor. It was all a costume, wasn't it? Underneath was something that understood violence on a level most species had evolved away from. Valen slowly brought her upper arms together in the thrust gesture of acknowledgement. That, she said carefully, was disturbingly comprehensive. Marcus smiled then, and it did not reach his eyes. You asked, Instructor. I did, Valen agreed. Tell me, Human Webb, which method do you prefer? Depends on the predator, Marcus replied immediately. And whether I wanted to warn the others. The implications of that statement rippled through the room like a shockwave. Warn the others. As if one disabled predator was just a message to the rest. I recorded everything in my diplomatic logs, but I knew that the words would not capture what I had witnessed. There was a reason humans had gone from primitive tool users to spacefaring civilization in an evolutionary eye blink. There was a reason the Galactic Council had spent 3 decades debating whether to make first contact with them. They were not just another species. They were the thing that made predators check under their beds before sleeping. Valen dismissed the class shortly after, but I noticed she asked Marcus to remain behind. I lingered near the exit, my curiosity outweighing my sense of propriety. You unnerved half the class, Valen told him, though her tone was more observational than critical. Sorry, Instructor, Marcus replied, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. You wanted honest tactical assessments. I did, she admitted, and yours was accurate. Frighteningly so. She paused. Tell me truthfully, how many of your kind think this way? Marcus considered the question. All of us. When we need to. Most of us. Even when we don't. That is what concerns me. Should it? Marcus asked. We are on the same side, Instructor. For now, Valen said quietly. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. For now, he agreed. I left the hall then, my mind racing with questions and my diplomatic instincts screaming warnings that I wasn't sure anyone wanted to hear. 3 cycles later, we would be deployed to Sector 7. There would be an incident with local wildlife, something the reports would later call a Category 5 predatory engagement. I would watch Marcus Webb disable 4 creatures in 30 seconds using nothing but a combat knife and that terrifying human capacity for violence. But that night, in the lecture hall, all I knew was that we had invited something dangerous into our ranks. and we had done it willingly. Sector 7 smelled like rotting vegetation and electrical storms. I hated it immediately. Our transport had touched down 6 hours ago on a planet designated only as GC-7743, which should have told us everything we needed to know about how little the Galactic Council cared about this rock. The mission brief was simple. Establish preliminary survey markers for a potential mining operation, collect atmospheric data, avoid the local wildlife. That last part turned out to be significantly more complicated than advertised. Krev, you getting these readings? Lieutenant Mora called from the scanning station. She was Plenari, a species known for their exceptional sensor perception, and if she sounded concerned, the rest of us should probably be terrified. I scuttled over to her display, my 6 legs navigating the muddy terrain with practiced ease. What am I looking at? Thermal signatures, she said, pointing at the screen with one of her 3-fingered hands. Big ones. Moving in a coordinated pattern approximately 2 kilometers northeast of our position. How big? 15 meters, maybe more. Quadrupedal locomotion, and there are at least 6 of them. I felt my plates flatten again. The survey report said the largest fauna topped out at 5 meters. The survey report was filed 18 months ago, Marcus said from behind us, making me jump despite myself. Humans move too quietly for beings without natural stealth adaptations. A lot can evolve in 18 months on a high mutation world. He was right, of course. GC-7743 had a radiation profile that made genetic drift happen at accelerated rates. What had been relatively harmless a year ago might have become significantly less harmless now. Should we recall to the transport? I asked, hoping the answer was yes. Negative, came Valen's voice through the comm system. She had remained aboard the ship to coordinate operations. You are 3 hours into a 12-hour mission window. Continue survey operations but maintain heightened alert status. Easy for her to say from orbit. Our team consisted of 7 members, myself, Mora, Marcus, the Helgran twins Roke and Call, a Urine named Zephyl who remained in his mobility sphere, and a Kestrian engineer called Pix, whose 4 arms were currently assembling survey equipment with remarkable speed. Fan out, Mora ordered. Standard spacing. Krev, you are on environmental documentation. Pikes. Continue marker placement. Rock, Cole, you 2 are on perimeter security. Marcus, she paused, clearly uncertain how to deploy him. I will float, Marcus offered. Cover gaps in the formation. Acceptable. Mora agreed, though I caught the slight relief in her voice. Nobody wanted to be directly responsible for managing the human. We worked in tense silence for the next hour. I documented soil composition, atmospheric particulate density, and native plant biochemistry. Standard procedure. Mind-numbingly boring, exactly what I had signed up for when I requested a quiet observation post. Then Rock made a sound I had never heard a Helgran make before. It was something between a rumble and a whimper, which should have been physically impossible for a being whose vocal cords were essentially animated granite. Contact, he said simply. We all turned. The creature that emerged from the tree line was not in any of our databases. It stood on 4 legs, each one thick as a transport support beam, with a body that seemed to be equal parts muscle and armored plating. Its head was broad and flat, sporting 6 eyes arranged in a semicircle that gave it nearly 270-degree vision. The mouth, when it opened, revealed rows of teeth that looked less like biological material and more like industrial cutting equipment. Oh, that is suboptimal, Zephyl commented through his translator, which was the most emotion I had ever heard from a Urim. The creature stared at us. We stared back. Nobody moved. Mora, Marcus said quietly. Are we downwind or upwind? What? Wind direction. Are we upwind or downwind from that thing? Mora checked her instruments. Downwind. Why does that matter? Because if we were upwind, it would have smelled us already and made a decision. Since we are downwind, it is currently operating on visual assessment alone. It is trying to determine if we are prey, predators, or something else entirely. What should we do? I asked, proud that my voice only shook slightly. Nobody run, Marcus instructed. Running triggers pursuit instinct. Nobody make sudden movements. Slow, lateral motion only. We need to make ourselves look bigger, more dangerous than we are. Rock laughed. A sound like grinding boulders. I am 4 meters tall and made of living stone. How much more dangerous can I look? Not you, Marcus said. You already look like a threat. The problem is the rest of us look like snacks. The creature took a step forward. Then another. It was testing us. Evaluating. Bix, Marcus said, still maintaining that eerily calm tone. You have any flash charges in your equipment? 3. the engineer replied. For clearing tunnel collapses, on my signal throw 5 meters to the creature's left. Not at it. Beside it. We want to startle, not provoke. This is a bad idea, I muttered. All my ideas are bad ideas, Marcus replied. They just happen to work more often than they should. Pix, ready? Ready. 3, 2, 1. Now, the flash charge arced through the air and detonated with a sharp crack and a brilliant burst of light. The creature recoiled, its head swinging toward the source of the disturbance. Now back away slowly, Marcus instructed. Stay together. Maintain eye contact. Show teeth if you have them. Make noise. Deep noise. Convince it we are more trouble than we are worth. We shuffled backward as a group, and I found myself making a low clicking sound that was probably the Contari equivalent of a growl. The Hillgrand twins actually did growl, a subsonic rumble that I felt in my thorax. The creature watched us retreat. It took one more step forward, then stopped. Its head tilted, processed, then 5 more emerged from the tree line. Well, Marcus said conversationally, this is significantly worse. What happened to predators usually being solitary? I demand. That is bears and big cats, Marcus replied. These look more like pack hunters, social predators, which means they are smarter, more coordinated, and significantly harder to bluff. The 6 creatures began to spread out, flanking us on 3 sides. It was a coordinated maneuver, practiced and efficient. They had done this before. Suggestions? Mora asked, her sensor appendages quivering with stress. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could almost see his mind working through variables and probabilities. Valen, he said into his comm, we are going to need emergency extraction. Negative, came the reply. Transport cannot achieve safe landing in your current terrain. You need to move to the designated pickup coordinates 4 kilometers south of your position. We have 6 very large, very interested predators forming a kill box around us, Marcus said. Moving 4 kilometers is not currently viable. Then make it viable, Human Webb. You have 20 minutes before atmospheric interference makes extraction impossible for the next 6 hours. The comm went silent. 20 minutes. Rock repeated. We can cover 4 kilometers in 20 minutes if we run. Running is how you die, Marcus said flatly. They are faster than us in this terrain. We run. They chase. We become separated. We get picked off one by one. That is how pack hunters operate. So what do we do? Pix asked, her forearms clutching her equipment like talismans. Marcus looked at each of us, then at the creatures. We give them a reason to be afraid. I thought you said we cannot run. I protested. We cannot, Marcus agreed. But they can. Mora, still have those other 2 flash charges? Yes. Rock. Cole, how durable are you two? Very, they said in unison. Good. Here is what we are going to do. Marcus began explaining his plan, and with each word I became more convinced that humans had fundamentally different survival instincts than the rest of us. His plan was insane. Aggressive. Violent. It worked perfectly. The lead creature moved first, lunging at what it perceived as the weakest link in our formation, which was me. I would have been offended if I were not busy screaming. Marcus stepped between us, pulling a combat knife from his boot in one fluid motion. The blade was barely 20 centimeters long, ridiculously small compared to the massive predator bearing down on us. He did not try to stab it. Instead, he waited until the last possible second, then dropped and rolled beneath its charge, dragging the knife across its underside as he passed. Not deep enough to be fatal, but deep enough to hurt. Deep enough to The creature roared and spun, confused that its prey had just injured it. Marcus was already up, moving laterally, making himself the target. Now, he shouted. Mora threw both remaining flash charges. They detonated simultaneously, one on each flank of the creature pack. In the confusion, Rock and Call charged forward, their massive stone fists connecting with the 2 nearest predators with sounds like rock slides. Marcus moved through the chaos like he was dancing, always exactly where the creatures were not looking, always one step ahead of snapping jaws and slashing claws. Every time a predator focused on him, he left another shallow cut, another bleeding wound, another message. I am more dangerous than you. Zephyl used his sphere's propulsion system to ram into one creature's legs, destabilizing it long enough for Pix to hit it with an improvised electrical discharge from her equipment. It was chaos. It was violence. It was 7 beings fighting for survival against 6 apex predators. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The lead creature, bleeding from a dozen cuts, made a sound. Not a roar. Something else. A call. The other 5 disengaged, backing away, regrouping around their leader. They stared at us, and in their eyes I saw something I had not seen before. Uncertainty. Walk, Marcus said quietly. Backward. Slowly. Do not break eye contact. We moved as one, maintaining formation, showing no weakness. The creatures watched, but did not follow. After 50 meters, Marcus spoke again. Now we run. We ran. 23 minutes later we were aboard the transport, ascending through atmospheric interference with alarms blaring about structural stress and recommended velocity parameters being exceeded. Nobody cared. We had survived. In the cargo bay, as the adrenaline faded and reality set in, Mora approached Marcus. That was the most reckless, dangerous, idiotic tactical decision I have ever witnessed. Marcus nodded. Probably. It saved all our lives. Hopefully. How did you know they would retreat? Marcus was quiet for a moment, cleaning blood off his knife. Not all of it was from the creatures. I didn't, he admitted. But predators understand one thing universally. Cost versus benefit. I just made sure the cost of eating us was higher than the benefit. Sometimes that is enough. And if it had not been enough? I asked. He looked at me with those forward-facing eyes, and I finally understood what made them so unsettling. They were not just the eyes of a predator. They were the eyes of something that had outcompeted every other predator on its home world. Then I would have moved to permanent solutions, Marcus said simply. But I am glad it did not come to that. I prefer my violence with purpose, not just for survival. Later in my diplomatic logs, I would write about what I had witnessed. About how humans approached danger not with the careful calculation of evolved prey species, but with the aggressive confidence of apex predators, who had forgotten what it felt like to be hunted. I would note that other species had claws, armor, venom, size. Humans had something potentially more dangerous, the absolute conviction that they could win any fight if they were willing to pay the price, and they were always willing to pay the price. Valen called it disturbing. I called it terrifying. Marcus called it Tuesday.